With war raging in Ukraine and the Russian presidential election approaching, the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny is seen as a clear message to the West.
The Russian position, despite all of the economic damage they've taken, all of the military damage they've taken, is that they will continue to engage in this war. They will continue to engage in human rights abuses, and it doesn't matter how the Americans or Europeans respond. The Russians will wait them out.
Navalny's death comes after the U.S. Senate overwhelmingly passed a $95 billion aid bill. It includes money for Taiwan and Israel, humanitarian aid for Palestinians, and $60 billion for Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion. That's in spite of the world's richest man lobbying on Putin's behalf and objections from certain members of Congress.
Are you an appeaser for Putin?
I think that I really don't care what David Cameron has to say. I think that's rude name-calling, and I don't appreciate that type of language. And David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
But do you think Putin's the good guy in all this?
Here's why those who oppose aid to Ukraine are wrong.
Aiding Ukraine, giving the money to Ukraine, is the cheapest possible way for the U.S. to enhance its security. The fighting is being done by the Ukrainians. They're the people who are being killed. The US and Europe are supplying them weapons. And in doing so, we are pushing back against Putin. This is a European country that is looking westward. And for the US to abandon it now, if it does, it's almost jaw-dropping.
Now the bill goes to the House, where it appears unlikely Speaker Mike Johnson will even bring it to a vote. Democratic leaders have raised the possibility of a discharge petition. That would require 218 votes to get the bill to the floor.
There's democracy versus autocracy. There's freedom versus tyranny. There's truth versus propaganda. And Ukraine is on the side of democracy, of freedom, and of truth, and we should make sure that we continue to stand with them.
In 1939, Hitler and the Soviet Union invaded Poland. Europe, and particularly Great Britain, appeased him. The U.S. mostly ignored him, and that indifference led to World War II.
In the 30s, lots of Americans said, why do we care about Czechoslovakia? Where is Poland? This is not our war. This is not our problem. That's what they said, American firsters, an echo of a sentiment that we have in this country today.
In 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. But this time, Europe and the U.S. didn't back down. Now Putin finds himself in a war that's costing him an estimated $900 million every day. He's lost 400,000 troops, according to intelligence sources, and thousands of tanks and other military vehicles. Still, House GOP leadership wavers in its support for Ukraine, as former President Donald Trump and his congressional appeasers seem prepared to leave Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and his people hanging.
Ukraine matters. It matters not to just Ukraine or to the United States, it matters to the world. This is about the rules-based international order. It's about one country's ability to wake up one day and change the borders of its neighbor and annex its neighbor's sovereign territory.
NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has long acted as a deterrent to Russian aggression in Europe. Its Article 5 mandate is simple. If one NATO member is attacked, all NATO members are required to come to its defense. That happened after 9/11, but Trump has never been a fan and said as much last weekend.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
Trump's relationship with Zelensky is complicated, particularly since he was impeached after trying to strong-arm the Ukrainian president into digging up dirt on then-candidate Joe Biden. As a result, Trump's support for Ukraine has always been tempered by his affinity for Putin, who seems bent on restoring the old Russian Empire.
If we don't defeat his imperial mission in Ukraine, then the system that the United States and our allies and partners and the whole world, including China, have benefited from over the 75-plus years since the end of the Second World War, that will drive a final stake through it.
In early February, Putin added Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas to a wanted list for her efforts to remove Soviet-era monuments. Officials from Latvia and Lithuania are on the same list. Meanwhile, European intelligence sources have warned the Russian leader is preparing for a war with NATO. In other words, if Putin isn't stopped in Ukraine, those who worry the U.S. could be drawn into World War III could see their worst fears come true.